Oh, it's rolling.
Good.
Nice.
You're recording.
Welcome to Assiti Shards. Yep. So there are a total of 5 major Assiti Shards. 1632 was the first one, and that's the one we're not going to talk about in this panel. So I'm going to ask everybody to introduce themselves and which shards you read about.
So, hi everybody, I'm Kevin Ikenberry. I write the Crossing, the shard that takes a group of Army ROTC cadets from 2008 back to just before the Battle of Trenton, and things go wrong from there.
I'm Gorg Huff. I write about the Alexander inheritance, where a cruise ship gets sent back to 322 BCE, and shortly after Alexander the Great died, and tried to keep the empire that Alexander created from completely coming apart. Then also the Peterbilt universe, where a Peterbilt pulling a tanker of gasoline and oil, it's a mixed load in separate containers, gets sent back to the year 1000 AD and the Mound Builders civilization.
The who civilization?
Mound Builders, the Mississippian civilization.
What year was the Queen of the Sea dumped back into? When did it come from? 2000 and what?
Actually, we were intentionally vague about that, but he probably knows because he's worked it out.
Queen of the Sea, it seems to be about 20 minutes in the future, from what I can tell.
And Peterbilt.
It is after that.
Thank you so much for your precise answer.
The Queen of the Seas has flex fuel engines, which I'm not aware of them being on board ships at the level that they were at.
Right.
And it's got a very advanced internet node on board, which I guess all I can say is it doesn't square with my experience back in 2013, how things ran on ships then.
Okay.
We cheated a little bit on the flex fuel engines and on the internet, but we were only cheating. Neither thing was unreasonable.
Right.
You could do the flex fuels now. The technology exists. And the internet node was simply the fact, if you go down to your local electronics store, Best Buy, anything, and buy a 4 or 5 terabyte drive. Now, imagine a cruise ship. They've got a fairly large budget. They get a couple of 100 terabytes of drive space, and now they don't have to pay for internet because they download, every time they dock, they download a big chunk of data. A bunch of Google searches, Google Earth, the complete Wikipedia, the complete Britannica, and a few other things like that.
Marxist Internet Archives. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and then basically when people go, they charge them just as though they were sending back to the mainland for the stuff, but it meant that they had it when it went through.
And I'll also note that there is Time Spike, which transfers the Alexander Correction Facility.
And that happened before the Queen of the Sea.
Yeah.
But that one keeps, it sort of stutters through time, and it keeps getting bigger as it goes.
Yeah.
So it scoops up some people on the Trail of Tears. It scoops up an earlier Spanish expedition, at least 2, maybe more levels of earlier peoples.
Has there been a sequel to that one yet?
Sort of.
Yeah, Garrett Vance has written a couple of novels in that setting, dealing with sort of people from the It's one of the soldiers from the Trailatiers and one of the Spanish explorers team up with some of the downtime people, well, some of the peoples from earlier periods, and are helping them build a civilization. But nobody has picked up on the prisoners or correctional center staff and anything outside of the short story.
The cavalry of the Cretaceous period,
Yeah.
or the sequence, sort of sequence.
So,
Who's wrong with that?
since you guys
And
were
they've been collected.
pioneering shards, can you talk a little bit about how much of the uptime you got to play with?
So with what we were doing with, when I was talking with Eric about what was happening in our normal timeline, the idea originally had been that, if you're not familiar, so An Angel Called Peterbilt was supposed to have been a short story, and Eric is not exactly great about writing short stories. They tend to get longer and longer and longer, and they suddenly become novels. So, but the original intent would have been that what we were trying to do with the establishment of what was going on with the project back in our time is, not only are we getting better at seeing the events happening, but we're also starting to track them and be able to potentially look at when's the next one going to happen. And then if that's going to happen, Eric and I had talked several times, and this was far future stuff that we never got a chance to really put together, bless you.
Thank you.
What if we purposely wrote them? What if there were things that we wanted to go and do? How could we actually make that work? Would there be a way to establish almost like a two-way gate so we could send people back to some event and then see what was happening? And we never got to that point, but being able to talk about the project, in particular, I have the ROTC battalion commander who is, he's lost to these cadets, and he has to be the scapegoat fall guy. Being able to have him essentially being scooped up by the project because they understand his background, they understand that he's a trained mathematician, and he's very smart, and he could be someone who is supposed to be, not only, this is going to sound bad, and I don't mean to sound bad, but somebody who knows their shit and is able to show that they know their shit. And being that guy, he was originally intended to join the project and actually have a small role in Peterbilt, being one of the folks that is actually observing the event as it happens.
Eric didn't tell me about that.
I know. And that goes back to that whole longer story thing. And so the idea was that we were going to start looking at how we could do more, not only with what was happening and what we had done downtime, but what was happening back here on Earth and what were the things that we were doing to potentially, again, how do we take the shards and continue to not only observe them, but track them and maybe ride them one day in the future. So I'd like to think that one of these days, we can all sit down and figure out how we can do that, but it would be a challenge.
In Peterbilt, about halfway through it, they actually do send a capsule back and catch them.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
That's as bad as when Michael Durda of the Washington Post revealed a certain major event in the very last Tiffany Aching, the Shepherd's Crown.
Yeah.
And in his review,
He could have said a lot more. So,
he said, well, it's on this dust jacket, isn't it? And then I was also in London when the second Star Wars came out, and they revealed, guess what? She's his sister in the paper.
oh gosh,
Shay.
Man Strikes Back.
What?
I'll spoil something literally I've written for you. I'm going to use that. When we go forward with the crossing, I'm going to use that. So.
Okay, good. And so will I.
So, what is going on up there?
Okay,
Without getting too deep.
okay, yeah. Here's the thing. What we don't get is, we don't get we get a little bit of the actual what's going on, the project of sending somebody back. But we only get very limited and secondhand about the politics of what's going on. What we do know is that it takes, our guy is like 30-something when the Peterbilt and his wife and kids get sucked back. and he's in his late 50s, early 60s when he gets sent back. And, you know, he gets sent back to like a year and a half after they arrive.
Okay, I haven't read that, but how do you get out? Remember Terry Pratchett's famous Trousers of Time?
Yeah.
And it's one of the themes in the 1632 verse is,
They have an anchor. They have an anchor that lets them follow the new timeline.
okay,
And the specific anchor, this isn't early in the book, so this is like the first thing that happens in the book. So
Oh, yeah.
that before the event catches them, they are hired to take a sensor unit around with them because they're trying to zero in on where the shards are, on when the shards are coming, and they're trying to have several moving sensors running around, and they're putting them on trucks. It's just a standard thing they're doing. But they get the sensor about 15 minutes before they get picked up by the shard. So the shard has this fully operational sensor on the Peterbilt when it picks it up. And that gives them a link to the Peterbilt, to the new timeline. And that lets them send the guy back to, as best they can measure it, because their aim still sucks. But as best they can measure it to not to after his family has arrived there, but not 40 years after.
Yeah, that was one of the things in the crossing that when Eric and I were going through it, we talked about when the former professor of military science meets I just lost the head of the project.
Yeah, I can't remember.
But anyway, they meet up, and it's very clear. He says, I know about when and about where your cadets are. And if you think about what's going on over the course from Time Spike forward, they've narrowed this down. We're not really sure. Now with Alexander Herodotus, we kind of have an idea. Now they're like, we're pretty close. We think it's late 1776, 1777, and they're right here in New Jersey. So if you know, with that kind of process going forward, now what Gorg is talking about with the anchor point, we can start to see where the potential jump-off points would be. And the other side of this, what's going on uptime is the DoD is now involved.
Yeah.
And so now the DoD, moving forward, that gives us an opportunity to mess around and say, now you've got somebody that gets a lot of money from the government. The project is going to have a lot of capabilities, and a lot of very smart people are going to come to it. And now we're at a point where we can take this and continue to branch out into new shards and again, establishing ways to go back and forth. It's going to be a lot of fun.
In Peterbilt, it's mentioned that the project to send the guy back is a NASA-style project, like of similar cost in real terms to the trip to the moon.
you guys have been watching Quantum Leap, haven't you?
Oh boy.
Have any of you actually read Robert Silverberg's Hawksbill Station, or Hawksbill Station?
I don't think I...
It's a time travel thing where some future revolutionary government sends political prisoners, male political prisoners, back to the pre-dinosaur age,
Yeah.
and female prisoners to a time like 10 million forward from that. But when you mentioned the DoD getting involved, I was like, warning signs, warning signs.
And Silverberg's story is a lot like William Allen Webb did Jurassic Jail. So
Yep.
it's the same sort of
Yep,
thing
yep.
where you've got the criminals are basically sent back to the Jurassic period, and that's where they have to serve their time.
So, this is why we never allowed anybody to write short stories that were set up. Because we knew Eric was up to something.
Yeah.
So, with the shards that you've written, how are they different from 1632. And how are they the same?
Queen of the Sea is the same in that it's got a lot of people. It's different in that it's not a coherent community. It's a bunch of people on a cruise ship. So it's the Professor and Mary Ann, not Uncle Buzz and Cousin Jungle. So it's a much more diverse group, and we're a little bit more open to the nuclear physicist ninja that we're not allowed in the many areas of Granville. Because though it should be noted that a cruise ship is generally the lower middle class to middle class vacation rather than the upper, this isn't the rich people's vacation. This is the plumber, not the doctor. Okay? Generally speaking, this is the plumber, not the doctor. This is the
Legal secretary.
legal secretary. It's people who make a decent living, and once a year they can afford a 5-day or a 10-day trip on a cruise ship. Come home and have pleasant memories of a lovely buffet and going around various islands and beautiful views and that sort of thing. But they're not. But it's not we're going to take a plane to Paris.
The thing that we try to do differently with the crossing, and it was repeated in Peterbilt, is the size of the shard.
Yeah.
So, we've talked about with, Time Spike and Alexander Inheritance, and to a certain extent, Queen of the Sea, you're talking much larger scale events. And the shard and the crossing is basically twice the size of this room. So if you took this room, copied it, and flipped it over that direction, that's basically what we have. It's a very small piece of time and space that's taken back. And then Eric actually contracts that even farther with what happens in Peterbilt. So what's happening uptime is we're getting, again, really good at starting to see these things, and we're starting to see them in smaller scales. So that was, I think, the thing that really said it differently. It's very much like 1632 because of the time span and what's going on and where they go, but it's also the first time you have, well, actually it's not the first time, because Alexander Inheritance is similar, where they're on the same piece of geographic ground, but different in time. But in this case, the cadets are moved only about 7 miles.
Well, actually, in Alexander Inheritance, they are moved to the other side of the world.
Caribbean to the Mediterranean.
So what am I confusing here?
Actually, at Peterbilt, they're in the same basic location, just 1,000 years earlier.
But the prison is still in the same.
I think so, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's the prison. Sorry, not exactly Alexander Inheritance. It's the prison, the correctional facility.
I think it's the Alexander Correctional Facility,
Yeah.
confuses.
That's where it was. And I have con brain because I've been doing panels since like yesterday. Whew. So yeah, being able to do those things. And so now we're seeing that we have geographical areas now also being moved. Granville's gone to the other side of the world. Alexander Inheritance has gone to the other side of the world. But in Time Spike and the crossing, and to a certain extent with Peterbilt, they're very limited in where they're moving. So now we're starting to play with the geographic piece as well.
But if they figure out how to do that, does that imply that they're going to go try to do something about Granville?
Shh! Don't get ahead of us. Maybe so. But that's not for us to discuss because we're dealing with the individual shards.
Yeah.
And so what happens in the overall Granville universe, who knows? But what I would imagine what would be happening uptime would probably be of interest to people.
Yeah, Eric was still gonna. Last I talked to Eric had no plans on actually Granville getting another shard. Granville was I think was the first one, and they had the least information on it. Okay, so they're figuring out, and even if they do come to the conclusion and come back and say, hold on, this happened. That this town in West Virginia got sent to Germany in the middle of the 30-year war. They might be able to figure it out that much, but at that point, tracking the offshoot, that's going to be, I would not expect honestly, I would not expect anything to happen in Grantham. So a bit more likely in Alexander Inheritance or the Time Spike. Well, actually, it's a lot more likely in Time Spike because you got the various things that they picked up, so they've got more data on it. But I can see, it has happened in Peterbilt, and I could see it happening in the Crossing.
Yeah, I agree. I think it could, but it's again, with the idea that we know Grantville disappeared, but we don't know the specifics, and we're not able to track what was happening with it. The idea of moving forward with it, the anchor point and being able to be really good about precision is now when they happen again, we're going to know exactly where it is, and if the project is doing what they've been essentially created to do, they're going to figure out not only where it is, where it's going, and again, how we write it, how can we potentially do this and establish the capability.
And then they're going to have to make a political decision of, do we interfere with this interference?
Exactly.
I mean, do we actually go back and rescue them?
Yeah. Yeah.
And also do we send people intentionally?
Right. Yeah. And why would we do so? I mean, and looking at it, are there things, do we want to explore these little pocket universes and extrapolate our what if scenarios, or is it going to be better for everybody involved to just go and pull them out? Yeah, it would be fun.
No.
Y'all look mind blown.
I mean, I know what I want to see in terms of the Peterbilt universe
Yeah.
is play the whole thing out.
Yeah.
So I want to see, it was even mentioned in the book about eventually taking a ship to Iceland and maybe Norway, what have you. And I would love to see that.
I have 2 books that I wanted to write that I have no idea, no idea what's going to happen. But one was the trip down to Mexico
Yep.
and Central America to get things like rubber and potatoes and that sort of thing. Chocolate, well, not chocolate. And then, yeah, because coffee, not coffee, but coffee's something that goes on.
Yes.
But then the trip up to the east coast of
Viking,
America to Newfoundland
Yep.
and perhaps even Greenland to buy horses, cattle, sheep, and to make sure that the inoculations that Jefferson brought back are working, protecting the Native Americans from the inadvertent or possibly not completely inadvertent infection of European diseases that were so destructive. Yeah.
When you said down to Mexico, immediately I'm thinking, when did Quetzalcoatl become a Aztec god?
But we're not sure. Nobody.
Because
The truth is, nobody actually knows that.
he's
have
been
to
used
make
a
it
lot.
up. What?
He's been used a lot with, say, some random European shows up there and, hey, I'm a god.
Yeah. We don't know. I don't think anybody knows the history of Central and South America. A lot of that was lost,
Yeah.
partly due to the conquistadors, but also partly due to just time and the changes in civilization. And even before the conquistadors, there were whole civilizations that lived and died and were forgotten about. So, for instance, archaeologists have been finding the remains of wooden pyramidal structures in the middle of the Amazon Delta.
Oh, yeah.
So, basically, the mound people, and we don't know where they came from. Archaeologists don't know where the mound people came from. They don't know who started the Mississippian culture. The genetics suggest that there was an external group that came in and took over, and that's what we did in Peterbilt.
have the opportunity to mess around with American history is going to be a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah.
The idea is that, when Eric and I talked about the multiple sequels and continuing on, so the series in my head is titled A More Perfect Union.
Yeah.
And being able to start to extrapolate certain things like what happens with slavery, what happens with women's rights, what happens with technological development, because we're talking about the concept of interchangeable parts and percussion cap ammunition 50 to 60 years before both of those things happen. What type of advantage would America have in a pre-industrial revolution? So there's a lot of things that are very capable of being done there. And then you bring back along the idea that they have their technology, and you've got Thomas Jefferson and some of the brightest minds in America who are going to be taking this and deconstructing it. But you might have forgotten that there's also two things that are being carried by the cadets that I did not specify. There are textbooks involved. So what are those textbooks, and what's going to be the driving factor of those? And I will tell you, at least what's in my head, it will be a huge game changer for what happens in America. So those things are important to be able to extrapolate and play with as we go forward too.
Also the mini ball.
Oh, absolutely.
The mini ball.
And that,
Bullet.
yeah.
And a 13-year-old Andrew
No, the
Jackson?
mini ball, like a ball, like the Civil War muskets, I think.
Oh, me bullet.
Right.
Yeah, it's,
Oh, mini-A. Okay.
yeah.
And a teenage
The
Andrew
mini
Jackson.
ball, sorry.
Breech loading, the idea of a breech loader.
Oh, yeah.
Although Ferguson had it already.
Yeah, but they also got to remember they've got 9 M16s. So again, what can I reverse engineer? How can I go forward with that? And granted, the metallurgy has to catch up. The percussion type of capabilities with the percussion cap have to catch up. But again, you've got the brightest minds with the technological advantage years ahead of things that were already being developed, because the percussion cap is only about 50, 60 years away from 1776 when it was first developed. So the plausibility of things moving forward is a lot of fun to play with. Sure.
I'm kind of curious, and this isn't something that I've seen, or maybe I overlooked it in 1632. I watched the progression of inventing and the problems with percussion caps with the various types of explosives. What happens when they don't have smokeless powder yet. What happens with modern style weapons when you fire black powder in them?
Our cadets
Other
are
than
gonna
they
find
get
out.
really, really dirty?
Yeah, our cadets
Yes.
are going to find out. You're going to be dealing with reduced muzzle velocities. You're going to be dealing with a significant amount of dirt and grime. M16 rifles are not the best as far as when they're dirty or wet or muddy or whatever else. So you add all those things together, it's not going to go well. And that's the whole point. Is the technology is not the thing that's going to turn things. It's the knowledge and the context that the cadets bring back with them that changes things.
Yeah, also, so I take it that you don't have a chemistry textbook, because if it did,
I'm not telling you. That's a spoiler.
if they did, they had gun cotton. And modern smokeless powder, one of the ways of making modern smokeless powder is to take gun cotton in a bubble. So they're probably going to be able to make smokeless powder, assuming they remember that, they know that that particular piece of information.
I will say there is a YouTube channel called Everything Black Powder, where the gentleman on there fires many modern firearms that weren't intended to be fired with black powder, just to see what happens.
And it's pretty fascinating. I've
It is
actually
fascinating,
seen that, and it really is pretty cool.
It eventually becomes a problem with reloading that stuff.
Yeah, which is why one of the important people that's introduced in the crossing very early is the gunsmith.
Yep.
And it was important to do so because as we were going through, the cadets have these rifles that they have blank ammunition. So now, how does that work going forward? So, and it's never established the gunsmith says I can do it, but it's essentially I'm going to try. And so now there's the opportunity to go forward with the construction and the making of smokeless powder and seeing what can be done. It's going to be a lot of fun, but I tell you, I like to mess with people. It's not going to go well.
Sounds like
It's going to be fun. I can't wait. I'm excited to continue.
So in some ways, do the cadets have the easiest time with the culture they get dropped into?
No. And it's something where, you know, they're going to do things just based on their knowledge and things that they consider common sense, which would be revolutionary to the colonial times, like washing your hands, boiling water. You know, those types of things will cut dysentery by 70% in the Continental Army, which then gives Washington a readiness factor that's much higher than the British Army at the same time, because they suffered from dysentery as well with their squalid field conditions. And so those types of things will be very easy, but there are also going to be things that are going to be difficult. And you know, being able to look into...
But your group of cadets is of multiple ethnicities and multiple genders.
Absolutely.
So, there were black people fighting for America in the Civil War.
Oh, absolutely.
And for
How
the British.
are
Yep.
the,
Yep.
but how are the,
And for the British.
Yes, and the
and
British.
for the British, but how are Washington and, well, how are the Southern officers going to deal with your young cadets?
Right, and that'll be fun to play with. And we were talking earlier, actually, you know, one of the things that was important to get across is that Washington would understand leadership. And he would see the reaction of the other cadets along with their squad leader, General Mason. And being able to understand that not only is he competent and capable, but he's a damn good leader. And that type of knowledge would filter out, but it's going to have to be something that would have to be re-engaged by Washington and by the leadership of the Continental Army as you go forward. The same thing with the women that are involved. You've got the one who she charges into combat and takes care of James Monroe's shoulder wound. And the doctor's like, "Who are you?" And she's, "Are you a doctor?" She says, "No, I'm an EMT." And Riker's, you know, he gets this kind of weird look on his face, but she takes care of his shoulder. And Washington recognizes also with her competence. And he recognizes that, you know, she's really damn good at what she does, but I can't have her with my army right now. And it might be better served that she goes with Monroe to Jefferson to work through how they're going to reproduce as much of this as they can. So it would be a trickle down.
What about Benjamin?
So I have ideas with Franklin. I'm not going to spoil them for you, but the whole crux of what I want to do going
Yeah,
forward.
he's in Paris.
He's in Paris. And so he's trying desperately to bring the French on board. And if you remember American history, the Battle of Saratoga in September 1777 is what convinces the French to join up and support what's going on in America. It's not going to do that in what I do. So we're going to have some challenges, and that's where Franklin's going to have to come in. I didn't mean to spoil that for you, but yeah, things are not going to go well.
Is there an audio?
It is in production right now. It is in production right now. So hopefully soon. I don't know what the date is, but soon.
I was just wondering if Gorg could talk about where things are going in the Alexander Inheritance universe.
Okay, we're at about 70,000 words in the Carthaginian Crisis,
Okay.
which Eric wanted to call but knew he couldn't call Bring Me the Head of Antigonus Once.
Now, why did they think it wasn't a good title?
You know,
The reason why I'm laughing would be like, that's too goddamn long.
Oh,
but basically he was convinced, and I have confirmed that Tony would never go for it. And though Paula and I were, it's looking more and more like we're going to publish it independently. So Paula and I actually considered using Bring Me the Head as the title. And we actually may use it as a subtitle. But and anything I say about this one is going to be spoilers, because we're still writing the book. It hasn't been published yet. We're at, like I said, about 70,000 words. I've been snippeting it on the Wordspell Facebook page. But what is going on is after Antigonus One Eye murders Susan on camera, the uptimers, the ship people, absolutely have to respond. This is not optional. Otherwise, ship people protection means no. And so they basically declare him dead, but now they're going to make it real. The first part of the book is about how they make it real. While that's happening, Ptolemy is trying to seize Syracuse, the island of Sicily. He's also threatening Carthage. The Pax Romana has, politically rather than militarily, taken the better part of Italy. And this is different than in our timeline because the Pax Romana in our history was an imposed peace. Imposed against the will of. What's going on here is the USSE is scaring the crap out of the smaller nations of Central and Western Europe and causing them to want to get together. And a politically astute person, this part is already written. It's in the one I wanted to call Pax Romana, but ended up being called, what was it called?
Sicilian Coil.
Sicilian Coil. Yeah, Eric wouldn't go for Pax Romana, and Tony agreed with him, both of them saying that a Latin title kills him. As Ptolemy, especially, Ptolemy has been being treated as this timid commander, which historically he sort of was. But he was a smart, timid commander. He would wait till the right moment, make his move, and tended to win. And that's how he ended up in control of Egypt. And that's how he ended up with control over Alexander the Great's body. But it's wearing on him. Part of that culture is if you're not, me big man, you're considered weak by the others, and this reputation for caution and care as a commander is pushing him to be less cautious and unwisely less cautious. So he is pushing the business in Sicily. He is moving troops east along the coast, and basically he starts a war with Carthage, and that causes Carthage to apply to join the Pax Romana. And now you've got Ptolemy pulling the USSE into a war with the combination of Carthage and the Pax Romana fighting on the same side. This is Carthage's navy, Rome's army, both equipped with gunpowder weapons.
Eastern Mediterranean versus Western Mediterranean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
World War I.
So Alexander was what? Was he 300 BC?
Yeah, he died in 322 BC, I think.
And Cleopatra was 380?
No, she was at 80.
Oh, at 80.
Because
okay, so it was
Augustus
just like
killed her.
300
Right.
years. Okay.
So, yeah.
273
The Ptolemy
Dynasty.
dynasty lasted 300 years, which is an amazingly
Yeah.
long time.
Yeah.
And was massively inbred before it was over. And yet, Cleopatra is, in my opinion, the other side of what you get when you massively inbreed than the Habsburgs. The Habsburg got the Habsburg on, and a bunch of morons at the end. Literal morons at the end. Cleopatra was, that last Cleopatra was probably freaking brilliant.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Both politically and personally in terms of dealing with people.
Yeah.
But that's generations away. She's never going to happen. But also the defectives aren't going to happen because I think her brother was one.
So in the crossing, you've got English-speaking people playing the English-speaking people. And then in the Alexandria Carriers, you have a very polyglot group on board ship
Yeah.
going to all sorts of different countries.
Yeah.
But
They've got technology
they've got technology, they can teach their phones
to
to translate.
Yeah. And, well, you can teach your phone, well, maybe I can't teach my phone to translate, but I can download an app that will let my phone translate because somebody else did it. If I had somebody, with me on the brink of the sea. And here is the nuclear physicist programmer that you're not allowed to have, but I have her anyway. But I justify her because she's my niece. Okay? Her actual name is Allison Huff. She's the number 2 person at the Nuclear Energy Administration right now. And she's also helped write the book on Python. So, she actually is a nuclear physicist programmer. So I justify her on that. Her sister is the simule for the Queen of the Sea.
Oh,
So that's those 2 characters, and I'm used their husband's last name rather than Huff, because when you categorize people in your with family members in your book, you can't.
The aspect of language is kind of funny because this was, I think, Tuesday or Wednesday before I came to FantaSci. I picked up my daughter and one of her friends from, they were taking the PSAT. And so the school had given them the afternoon off, so I picked them up and the girls are like, hey, will you take us to Five Guys? Sure. So I'll take them to Five Guys. And so they're sitting there and they're having this conversation. I'm eating my burger and I'm listening, and the slang, of course we've all used slang in our lives, but they're using this thing that's almost like another language. And I started having this thought process of, what if General Grant, the Lord General Grant, who was the commander of all British forces, it receives this captured intelligence, and it's nothing but slang. And can you imagine him reading this going, "Fazizzle my shizzle? What? I do not understand this.
LOL.
You need to find somebody that understands what this means." And nobody understands what it is because the cadets are speaking in pop culture references and slang of the 2008 time frame, and they're quoting movie lines to each other,
You have code talkers.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But it's a code, so that's going to be something that I play with going forward, because I'm just sitting there listening to this going, because it is a challenge with English speaking. And granted, it would be a little bit different. The dialects would be different. There would be misunderstanding of accents and whatnot. But that whole aspect of bringing in the pop culture piece, oh my God, that's going to be phenomenal to mess with, because now you have an instant code that is essentially unbreakable, because
It's a different language.
it's a different language, and a different context to it, and the British Army will have no concept of any movie line that's ever given to them. So it would be a lot of fun to play with.
Cecil B. DeMille directed a movie in the 30s set in a high school, and he gave the script to the president of the Student Association because he wanted to make sure that the movie's slang was up to date for 1936.
And it came back with all kinds of,
You watch it, and it's like, you can tell this is a Cecil B. DeMille movie. Even though it's a high school movie, it's got that epic march and feel of DeMille to it, so it's a weird combination.
yeah, it would be. Do you know the name of it?
If you give me your email address, I can send it to you.
So with Peterbilt, though, you've got some real cross-language obstacles.
Yeah, they land and they don't have, nobody knows what these people spoke. I mean, literally, we do not know what language they spoke. We do not know what descendant Native American languages came from them. But and we don't know where the language came from. So we made it all up. We made every word of that language up because nobody knows what the actual language was. But that meant that there was no way that a phone could have a translation app in it. And so basically, the chemistry teacher or the chemistry professor had to be their language teacher, and it was the kids who learned the language first, and they learned it the way kids learn languages. They went out, they played with each other, and they learned the language. And it was especially her kids, though the 12-year-old was still in that range. It was the younger kids that did it best and most naturally. But then they did a lexicon and they learned to write it and so forth. They learned because immersion, if you're going to learn a language, the way to do it is to learn the language, to immerse. That's why she moved into the outside house, out of the Peterbilt, so that she would be immersed in the language and learn it. And she succeeded in doing that, but at the same time, the natives were intensely focused on learning the Peterbilt people's language, so that because they needed a language that the hierarchy didn't understand, and they needed a magical language, which the Peterbilt language was because it came with the Peterbilt that was delivered magically, that had all this power and all this stuff that it could do, and could plow their fields and stuff like that. And that made it, and then Jesus Christ Superstar.
Oh, yeah.
And learning a language through singing helps.
Yeah, it's just,
It's a part.
Just thinking one fine century, the English are going to show up and really be shocked.
Actually, this is just a logical extrapolation, but it's not the English that's going to show up on them. They're going to show up in England.
yep,
And they're going to show up in England in a steam-powered ship.
yep.
You know, Orson Scott Card, I don't know if you read the book, the 10 travel novel where they go back to South America and they deal with the Indian culture then, so that by the time the English, they actually end up going over there, in their sailing ships.
Yeah.
So you need to check that one out, it's a really good one.
Kim Stanley Robinson also.
Yeah, Robert Heinlein wrote a book number of years ago called Farnham's Freehold, where he had some of the characters communicate with each other using slang and movie references. And so when you started talking about that, it's pretty old, but he did it very, very well.
Too bad none of them know Klingon.
Maybe that's a textbook, come on.
They could be Tolkien friends.
Actually, yeah, your guys could. I mean, that would make a certain amount of sense.
A couple of them are pretty nerdy, so who knows? I mean,
Yeah.
I was trying to think about what was the Saxon capital of England at the time of Peterbilt. This is only 66 years before 1066.
Yeah.
So I think it was London, but of course it's the London of the early 11th century, not the
Might have
London
been
of...
Winchester, though.
Might have been Winchester?
think
Okay.
so.
But yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I would have to look that up
Right.
before writing the next one. The book after the next.
but yeah, and I was thinking it would be a steamship that would be chugging up the Thames, or
Yeah.
you do Iceland instead, or Denmark, or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're going to get a steamship simply because a steamship's a better way of getting around than sailing.
Yeah, Winchester.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is Winchester, by the way.
Okay.
Ah, okay.
It is 7:50. Any final remarks?
I think the only final remark I would say is it's been an honor and privilege to jump into this with both feet. And having Eric's guidance and blessing and kicking the ass every once in a while when I needed it, it really changed a lot of things. I never imagined writing an alternate history of any sort. I've always been a sci-fi and military sci-fi person, but jumping in with this and starting to recognize the possibilities, that the deeper I got with my research, the more opportunities for things to tie into the storyline happened. And it's taught me a very valuable lesson going forward, and I think it's going to be something that, with the opportunity now, thanks to the folks from 1632 and beyond, to look at serializing the continuation of the crossing and tell the series that Eric wanted me to tell, is going to be a lot of fun. And you know, I will make no bones about being a hopeless romantic and a very positive person. So when I talk about a more perfect union, but I also talk about the cadets screwing up, there's going to be a lot of wins too. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. What he said, basically.
All right. Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Afterwards, if you've got follow-up questions, and we have a bunch of stuff. Let's help yourself.
Yes, come get the swag, please.